You're listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer.
For someone to explain,
bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby. Sharing ideas to make the game better.
Okay, welcome to episode number 45 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Damian McGrath. Damian is the head coach of the Canadian men's sevens team, who finished 8th in the World Rugby standings for the 2016-17 season. Born in Yorkshire, England, he played and coached professional rugby league, both with the Leeds Rhinos and England, before Sir Clive Woodward offered him the opportunity to cross codes in 2001. After this encounter, he then had roles with England, Leicester, Spain, Wales, Samoa, and now with Canada. And it's a pleasure to have him on the show. So welcome, Damian.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah, no worries. So I got you to email me some info on your coaching journey so far, and it's a pretty comprehensive one. I only briefly touched on it. Can you go into a bit of details about the rugby league background and then transitioning to rugby?
Sure, it is a bit of a long and winding road. I was a professional rugby league player, but not a very good one. I was always fascinated by what made good players what they were. What was the difference between them and the rest of us mere mortals? And
yeah,
and whilst it was professional rugby league, back in those days it was a part-time thing. You had a day job, and then we trained 4 or 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
I was I trained to be a teacher. I went to university to be a teacher, so I suppose the transference into coaching was an obvious one, given that background and interest. I became player coach for the reserve grade at Batley, and just by chance, my former coach recommended me to the Leeds Rhinos, to their head coach at the time. They were starting off their big academy program in the late 80s, early 90s, and looking for an up and coming coach. And I suppose just like sometimes it's been in the right place at the right time, and I got that opportunity with one of the blue chip clubs of British Rugby League, and that sort of set me on the road to where I am today. I worked through the academy system. I coached Great Britain Academy. I coached Great Britain under 21s. I was offered the opportunity then to move up to the senior team, and I was lucky to work with some really top line coaches in the first team at Leeds. That also led to me being appointed as the assistant coach to the Great Britain full team. 2000 World Cup was a great highlight for me, and
amazing.
With Leeds we won the Challenge Cup and went to grand finals, and it was a great time, and I learned so much and met so many great people. That led to me. I had a brief stint in London with when Richard Branson's Virgin Group bought the London Broncos.
Oh yeah, which,
was a big deal at the time. They brought over a host of stars, and I had a fantastic year in London with some of the NRL's big stars came in for a year. And then I got that chance to go. Clive was building his elite performance team with England Rugby, which led on to the World Cup win and many other things. And I took a gamble, and I went across with one of my great friends, Joe Lydon, who was a rugby league legend, and the two of us went across there, and I did skills and defence. It was the days way before rugby league people were really involved, and I had a fantastic time, but learned so much. I worked with the sevens predominantly and with England A, and had a couple of years at Leicester Tigers because the people like Clive had a good grasp on things, and they wanted me to get some day-to-day knowledge. And it was the time when the Tigers were sweeping all before them, and virtually the whole team were, with England or the Irish. Everybody was international. It was a marvellous opportunity. So I had a couple of years there where I did England and Leicester, and like all good things, it eventually came to an end when the senior team weren't doing well, and they virtually swept the board with the coaches, and that led me to doing a couple of years in Spain, which was something I never thought would happen. And with the Spanish national team, being English, you go to Spain on holidays and you'd see nothing but and/or football teams, and I was surprised how big rugby was in Spain, and I'd go over for 4 weeks at a time to Madrid, and we had a marvelous time working there with such a committed group of players. And I found out that there were more registered players in Spain than there were in Scotland. And
wow,
some amazing. I didn't realise how big rugby was, and we had a great journey. It was before the financial crash, and there was quite a bit of financial backing for the team, and we moved up from 38th in the world, I think, to about 19th. It was a real upward curve. But then I was offered the full-time opportunity to go back into rugby league with Huddersfield Giants as performance director. I felt, family-wise was a better move. My wife was keeping us on the straight and narrow in terms of her job. So I came back there and had they say never go back, and I don't know what I was expecting. It wasn't quite as exciting as the first time round in rugby league, but a couple of good years there, and then Joe Lydon, who I mentioned earlier, who'd been at England with me, he was then the performance director with the Welsh Rugby Union. He invited me to come and be head of rugby in North Wales.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of great years there, and then Simon Amor took over as the head of the Sevens programme with England, and Simon was captain when I coached the England Sevens originally, and he said it was his first ever senior coaching role. He wanted me to come and assist and work on the things that I'd done before. So I thought, why not get back? So I went back to England for that year, and then the Samoa job came up, which was a whole. I think you could fill 2 hours on that as an experience. But then it was a great life experience. Although the rugby side was up and down, it ended in a bit of a messy divorce, but the Canadian role came up, and here I am eventually after that long story of in Canada and enjoying life.
Yeah, and you're fully entrenched in drinking Tim Hortons every day. Is that where you're at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Tim Hortons is the one for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I'm really interested in that rugby league union kind of crossover. Like I all through my junior stuff, I played rugby league and didn't switch until I went to university, and I am always interested in what coaches think about, what are some takeaways for union that coaches could take from league, from today's modern game.
I think the games are much closer together now than they were when I first took that 10th step back at the beginning of the millennium. Then the only thing really that was similar was the shape of the ball. Everything else was much different. My transition across came when two big stars of British Rugby League at the time, Iestyn Harris and Henry Paul, made big money moves across. Yes, Cardiff, and Henry went to Gloucester. And they were huge stars in Rugby League at the time, and they struggled because the games were played so much differently. Rugby League's played at the defensive line. Back then, the game was played much further away in rugby union terms. Nothing like it is today, where where it's played much further up. So it was adapting to the nuances of the game. Although rugby league was my background, and I'd been a rugby league man through and through, I'd gone to a grammar school where rugby union was the game. So we actually played rugby at school, and so it's not as though it was completely alien to me. But I found it was, if I didn't try and compare it like for like to rugby league, I found it much easier to deal with. That just like rugby league, where the play of the ball is the centre of the game, the breakdown is a key to rugby union. And I think if you put that into your mind and realise that the game has much more similarities, then you want to draw people into the breakdown to create more space outside. And those were the lessons I learned very quickly.
Yeah, I got to admit, I haven't watched a rugby league game for a few years, even state origin. I'm kind of being in Canada, you don't see a lot of it. But I think in terms of physicality in defence and some of the running lines in attack when they do run backs moves off fourth or fifth tackle, there's definitely some things to grab there.
I think initially when I first made that change, they were looking for that defensive system at rugby league. And organising defences is one of the easiest things I think as a coach to do, and I think you can make yourself look good by preparing your team not to lose as opposed to trying to win. People such as Phil Larder, who went to England and had such a a big effect. You know, and I did the same with the England Sevens and the England A and all those teams I was involved with. Working on defensive systems at that time was a much easier thing to do, and you could have some immediate success. And initially, I think that was what rugby wanted from rugby league. They wanted that defensive alignment, and they thought that everybody coming from rugby league would just be defensive orientated. Whereas as a rugby league coach, we worked much more on the individual skills, and the attacking side of the game had much more importance to us.
You mentioned the Samoa coaching role, and in terms of experiences and takeaways from that, what did you get as a coach and just as a person? Because the Pacific Islands are just awesome, and the people are amazing, and they're born to play rugby as well. So there would have been some great takeaways as well.
Yeah, and culture's such a huge thing. Yeah, I think everybody looks from the outside at Samoa and Fiji and Tonga and thinks, I'd love to get my hands on those guys. You could really do something with them. It's not so much the players; it's everything else that goes into it that makes it so complicated. Because there are three things in the Pacific Islands: there's God, rugby, and family, and everything revolves around those three things. And you need to be mindful of everyone's mindset and how they approach things and how they look at things. And it's not just organising the team to play. Young people are very very respectful of anybody who's older, because that's you don't have to earn respect there. By having age, you automatically get respect. So having two-way conversations with players to begin with was difficult. Obviously, the language part of things was hard, but and it was fantastic from a coaching point of view, because you get used to all the bells and whistles in the Western Hemisphere. There we had the pitch looked like the fairground when the fairs left town. There was no grass. We had a couple of balls and a few cones, no kit. The players had no training kit for the entire time I was there. And
wow,
it's amazing what you can do without all the extras. And the journey was about building trust with the players, and because once the players trusted you, you could trying to explain to them why we did things, because I'm always big on why we do it before this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and to get them to buy into what I wanted to do. And I gave them I put in place a little leadership group, which seems obvious to people who who work in Western Hemisphere teams. But the players, I gave them a say, even though I to a degree I led them by the nose to. But I allowed them to make decisions on things we did, and it was much of the success we had. I mean success in relative terms, from where we were to where we finished, was based on me getting the players to buy into my way of doing things, and to get them to trust. And by the end, there was a lot of communication, and they were leading sessions and having input, and which really warmed my heart, because whilst it didn't maybe translate into lots of cups and medals, I just felt from where we started with players with their heads down who didn't want to look you in the eye, to where we finished with a vibrant, really positive, happy group, then that was the big thing for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what were some of the key things? Like you mentioned, creating a leadership group, but a lot of it would have been like not actually on the field. When you're interacting with them.
I mean, what Polynesian players are like. They've got the physical attributes. They've all got a sidestep. They love the physicality of the game. They love to run into people. He was trying to get them to have that discipline of catch and pass, and when that you don't just throw the ball anywhere. But I did that, over time, rather than trying to be too disciplined to begin with, and they appreciated that side, because at home and at school or wherever they've been, discipline and not having an opinion was what they were used to. I encouraged the opposite, which was part of my downfall with the Samoan hierarchy in the end. But that's a different story. But it was doing the things off the field, that when we sat in rooms and chatted about the game and trying to explain and getting them to give an opinion and be confident to give opinions. Which it's easy to say that I want you to trust me because I'll trust you, but that doesn't. The world doesn't work like that. it was proving to them that they could, I had confidence in them and trust, and that it was all right to make mistakes, and we could just. It was great from a coaching perspective, because it really takes you back to the basics and almost starting from scratch. But it's nice when there's a little bit of talent there as well to add to it.
For sure. Okay, and then you arrived in Canada after that stint. What was your assessment of the Canadian team and the depth and the facilities when you arrived?
Well, it wasn't quite what I was expecting. I didn't, because of visa problems, I didn't get to Canada until November, and we only had 3 weeks until we went off to Dubai and Cape Town for the first leg.
That's right.
I hadn't realised that the players had been on strike since the end of the previous season over terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. So no pre-season training. Half the squad had retired. As you well know, there's not much money in as a player in Canada. A lot of the players had decided enough was enough and gone off to pursue careers. Mm. So it was. It wasn't quite as rosy as maybe I was hoping. Similar, I suppose, to Samoa. The team had finished 13th on the World Series, just hung on to their position in the World Series group, and very negative about lots of things. I think everybody was downhearted and down in the dumps. I spoke to again. It was the same thing. We did more off the field to begin with. They'd been a very predictable team the year before, and they were easy to coach against. And I spelled that out to the players, and they agreed. And again, I went through why we were going to do what we were going to do and why we were going to train in a certain way, because and it was a much easier journey with them, because obviously we spoke the same language. It was easy to communicate, and I didn't have to encourage too much two-way communication from them. Did the same thing. If you ever come to one of my sessions, it's there's laughter and positivity, because I felt that the first time I met them, that there was a lot of negativity around and everybody downhearted, and I wanted to lift the spirits. And we didn't have a big squad, and the team throughout the whole year has virtually picked itself, because that's all we've had. So. But I wanted to encourage them and give them confidence, and I said, look, we'll go to Dubai and Cape Town. We haven't had any chance to train. It'll be a watching brief. Let's see where we are and what we're up to. And whilst it didn't go very well in terms of results, and we finished 13th in both legs, which reflected where they were, I saw things that I thought, there's one or two good players here who are a little bit better. Maybe they are. And the change, I think, has only been that I've got the game plan, I think, that suits their skill set, rather than trying to play a game, based on whatever the coach thought previously.
Yeah.
I've tried to fit the game to the players' attributes, and they've preferred that and accepted that, and it seems to have worked for them.
Yeah, well, I think the results speak for itself. You mentioned the tricky start there, but the second half of the season,
once we got Christmas was great. It gave me a chance to assess the games, assess the players. We had a month before we went to Wellington and Sydney, and the next tournament in Wellington we finished fourth and played really well. And it was only the number of injuries that we had that meant we dropped away the following week. But I think of the 8 tournaments after Christmas, we got to the quarterfinals 6 times out of the 8, whereas the previous year they never made the cup competitions ever, so there's some great players there, and it was just a matter of A, giving them some confidence, and B, finding a game plan that suited their attributes.
Yeah, well, if you were to looking at the results overall, you won in Singapore and got bronze in London, 8th overall, so it's pretty huge, and what do you think? You mentioned the confidence side of things, but in terms of game plan and strategy, or not giving too much away, but what do you think worked really well for you guys in that area?
I mean, most teams on the World Series go side to side and try and get around the outside of teams. Apart from Justin Douglas, we have no real speed in our team, so it's pointless trying to outflank teams too soon.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've got a group of big, strong, powerful athletes who enjoy the confrontational side of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Much of it is based on going forward. I'm very rugby league in itself. We earn the right to go wide. We can play close to the ruck and draw teams in. We're very good at keeping the ball, and then having people like Nathan Hirayama and Lucas Hammond who understand who'll play with their heads up, which I know is what all coaches look for, but they can see when enough players are being drawn into them, move the ball that little bit wider, and then we outflank teams. And the players have really bought into that, and they can see the benefit of it all. And we've scored some great tries moving the ball about, but our game's based on what we're good at, which is going forward, and we're quite happy to hold the ball for 3 or 4 minutes if we have to, and then score, as opposed to always looking to score off every play. And the players have really, as I said, they understand why we do what we do, and they enjoy doing that.
Yeah, well, I think sevens has changed so much, in the last 5 years. It used to be exactly that. The less phases you go into, the more games you win, and now it's the opposite.
The breakdown is, as like you said, most teams, and Fiji keep away from the breakdown, but that's because that suits the way they play the game.
Exactly.
I don't think you can use Fiji as an example on anything, but other teams, the breakdowns become such a big part of the game now. South Africa's.
Oh yeah.
While South Africa have Sinatla and Speckman and all these guys who are exciting, their games are all won defensively and at the breakdown. They're so good there. New Zealand have done that for years. England are good at the breakdown. Argentina make it a real dogfight. So you have to be able to compete at that. And whilst my background is catch pass, and I spend a lot of time on that. We also spend a lot of time on the breakdown and making sure that our breakdown stuff is second to none.
Right, great. All right, and what about you coaching personally? What's your favourite area of sevens to coach, and why is that? And what's a session going to look like when you coach that part of the game?
I looked at that question when you sent it through. I thought, I don't know if I have a favourite part. Like anything, whichever part of the game you practice and work on, and it works for you in a game, you feel a lot of satisfaction. We do a lot of work on our set piece stuff, tap penalties and layouts, because they're real starter plays for us and give us a real go forward. So, and we've had some real success with them. I love seeing players do my favourite quote is that Leonardo da Vinci one. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and I love seeing players do the simple things of catch and pass and carry really well. And I highlight those in our video reviews when it's done and something good comes from it. So I do basic skills in every session I do. We always do some grip or carry or catch, pass, something around basic things, tackle technique. But I think I love the attack side more than the defence. I would love to see us try and the chess side, where you want to move teams about and see that come to fruition on a game time is, I think, very satisfying.
What about what advice would you give to coaches putting a sevens team together? Often it's kind of it's in the middle of the season or the end of the season, and you got maybe 2 or 3 sessions to piece the whole thing together. How would you prioritise what you work on in that kind of situation?
I'd stay away from too much structure, because the game's all about chaos. One of the things we do when we train, whatever we do, whether it's a set move or whether it's open play, every player has to be comfortable in every position. So the props and the forwards have to be at first receiver and make calls. So I'd work on doing the basic skills and making sure that everybody's comfortable in every position. And I know that's easy to say, but you just want to make sure everybody's got the basic skills and understand, that they could be called on to use them at any time.
Okay, cool. So what about now? What are your goals for next season for the team, and also what are some work-ons that you want to try and do in terms of professional development in the off-season?
Well, I've spent a lot of the players I coached back in the day are now head coaches at Super League clubs here in UK, where I'm on holiday now. so I've spent some time going around just catching up with them and seeing what they're up to. So that's been my little bit of personal development over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Expectations going to be very high for the team next year because we've done much better than anticipated over the last few months. So we've got to maintain that consistency. But I think if we can, my main priority is to keep this basic group together and find 3 or 4 players to add to the squad, because whilst the 12 have virtually picked themselves every time we've gone, because they're the best 12 we have, and we've been lucky with injuries, but I know that's not going to be the case always. So I have to find players who can push the players who got their hands on the jersey now, and players who are going to be there for the future. So the biggest work on is going to be recruitment. I've only been in Canada 6 or 7 months, so this summer is going to be big, going around meeting people and looking for players to bring in. We lost tons of money from the Olympic program, which had a big knock-on effect for us. So we've got to try and find some funding to help us do what we need to do. And behind the scenes, a lot of people at Rugby Canada are working hard to do that. So there's tons to do. And from a teamwork on, we're not going to change too much because it would be foolish to do that. We've found a way of playing that suits us. It's to add a little bit of finesse to a lot of the basics we do. So there's some of the things I've picked up here in England, and we'll look to add those to our game.
Yeah, well, it's exciting, and I think looking at the World Rugby Sevens side, I think there's 178 days until the first tournament. So that sounds a lot, but you're probably 174. Actually, it is. Sounds like a lot, but definitely with the amount of work that you just mentioned.
Got a lot, like I said, last year we didn't get a pre-season. We start pre-season training on the 25th of June. Right through to December, we'll have a couple of warm-up tournaments and some time off in between. But we're going to try and get a lot of really good work done in this time and give chance for injuries to heal, but to work on fitness and on the skill side of the game.
That's great. It's exciting, and really looking forward to seeing how it pans out for the second year. It'll be great. All right. Well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up in Yorkshire, who was one of your favourite players going around?
Well, in rugby league, it was a guy called Keith Mumby. He was the fullback for Bradford Northern back in the day, and he never seemed to ever miss a tackle and always beat the first man when he ran the ball out. And he was who I'd have, if I could have been that good, that was who I'd love to have been. And I always loved watching him play. And I was lucky enough to meet him and and call him a friend. So yeah, Keith was the man when I was growing up.
Oh, beauty, awesome! And what about now? Who's a favourite player or favourite athlete or rugby player that you like watching?
Well, it was Conrad Smith, but he's retired. So, Sonny Bill, I would say. Yeah. Sonny Bill does all the things that I love about rugby.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if Lions fans would agree with you on that one.
Maybe not, but
yeah, no, he's special, that's for sure. He's unbelievable. That his offload game is right up there with the best.
And it was great to see in action close up on the in the 7th Circuit last year. It was great to a chance to coach against him, and that was a great experience too.
Awesome. Okay, and what about coaches? Who are some of the high-profile coaches that you respect and look up to?
Well, I've been so lucky that I've worked with and alongside and for some fantastic people. But there was a guy, and he's not with us anymore, God rest his soul, called Graham Murray, an Australian who came to Leeds in 1997. And I was his assistant for 2 years. And from my point of view, he was the sort of final piece in my coaching jigsaw. He was the technical coach is a tenner penny, I think. There's lots of people who are good technically and things. The things that I've found over my years involved is the best coaches have that man management ability, which is why I made such a thing about it in Samoa and then in Canada about trying to get the best out of people. Graham was a genius at that, and he had huge success in Australia and in England in his coaching career, wherever he went, because he was just so good with people. And he he had an ability to get people to do what he wanted, and with a smile on the face. He was always interested in people. But he could be hard as well at the same time. There was always that chance of a big stick coming down, but he was terrific, and I learned so much from him. And I think about him and what he did often. It was he had a huge effect on me.
That's pretty huge. And what about local grassroots people that you've met in Canada? Who do you think deserves some recognition there?
Well, there's a guy called Robin McDowell who, from the first day I got off the plane, got in touch with me, and pester's not the right word, because that indicates that that's something I don't want. He's constantly in touch, giving me the names of players, talking about what he feels the game needs. He's one of these people who Canadian rugby need to get involved in. I'm getting him as a junior Maple Leaf coach with the under-18s. He's a terrific guy, and he's Canadian rugby and sevens through and through, and he's prepared to go anywhere and do anything to further his career, which is not easy in a place like Canada where opportunities are limited. And I just think he's a terrific guy, and there's him and other people like him who we need to encourage, because you don't want to be bringing outsiders in all the time. Eventually it'd be great to see Canadian coaches running Canadian rugby.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen what he's doing on social media, and he's definitely really active, and moved to the prairies to start up an academy there, which shows his level of commitment.
He's gone to Mexico to work with the women national, their national team. You need people who are willing to go that extra mile. And my long and boring story of my coaching career has mirrored that. Sometimes you can't just stay at home. You've got to take chances, and when they come, and push yourself forward. And I see a lot of that in Robin.
Cool, awesome. Well, great way to end the show. Okay, well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Damian, about your coaching journey so far, and really, like I said earlier, really excited to see how Canada pan out in next season, and great signs so far, and can't wait to see how the boys run out again, and so thanks again for your time for joining us. It's been a great chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at RugbyCoachSCNR or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.